Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Do Not Flush. Today's episode is titled "Do Not Flush Bias." If for any folks new to Do Not Flush, we try to kind of come up and talk about some of the topics that should be discussed in business and ones that should deserve maybe a more robust um, take on it, a more balanced take on things. And today we have a special guest with us, Rachel, which she'll introduce herself in a bit. On today's episode, we all know that AI is everywhere, and every business is talking about it. Every CEO is wondering how it fits in their strategy and what it could do. But the real question is AI actually making businesses smarter, or are we just making bad decisions faster? Rachel, you've spent years looking at AI through the lens of decision making, risk, and strategy. You're not only looking at whether AI is cool, but you're looking whether it's actually helping leaders make better calls. So let's start there. First, do you mind give us a quick intro on your background,
Sure.
and we'll go from there.
So I've been in the BPO space for nearly 30 years, both as a client, as a vendor, and then as a consultant, helping my clients outsource effectively and smartly. Really, with a deep focus on trust value management and helping companies move beyond surface level metrics to build real, lasting credibility. Whether it's travel and hospitality or telecom, the toughest challenges today are automation and call deflection, and all of that comes up very quickly, but frequently gets lost in um, sort of the talks about customer experience and how do we balance it and what does trust driven business strategy look like. And that's kind of where I live my life right now.
Can you also give us a bit depth into why do you feel like you're well suited to speak to this topic per se?
Sure. So pragmatic application of AI is very much what I do. I implemented my first AI project in 2013, working with a client to handle some, at the time, what we considered sort of w- high volume, low return work. We were trying to do some call deflection and move that, and that all drove me very early on to adoption of AI and figuring out how's it used pragmatically, right? Because you listen to what everybody is talking about in the market, and there's a ton of hype. There's also a lot of talk about what's not going well, why it's not going well, how many biases are built into AI. And so a big chunk of everything that I do today is about being pragmatic about AI. What does that look like? How do we use it across in the BPO space specifically? We can very easily use it for some call deflection, right? We can automate parts and pieces of it. If I'm taking 10 million calls a month and I can shave 20 seconds a call off just by doing an upfront AI based validation process, right? Super simple. And I shave that's 20 seconds per call per, 10 million a month. It's a big potential cost savings. And it doesn't necessarily impact customer care. It doesn't impact the customer experience. It might even smooth it along. But the process for measuring it, how do we measure that AI is being effective? How do we measure that uh, it's both producing the necessary efficiency that we're wanting from the automation, but also not impacting customer care or that customer experience? That's a big chunk of where my focus has been since 2013, basically.
Oh wow! And what did AI look like back then, and how does it compare to today? And because I feel like everybody, to a lot of folks, AI came on into the scene maybe around
Like
20.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, when kind
Right.
of generative AI was the main thing, but in reality, we've had discriminative AI for quite some time now. I mean,
Yep.
starting with in my house, my vacuum, my robot vacuum that goes around, that's essentially AI, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so what was it like back then? So kind of the intention behind this question is to help the audience relate or realize that some of this technology they've actually come across before,
Yep.
and they just wasn't labeled as AI and now is being labeled as AI, just so it can connect the dots here.
Yeah, I think like there's sort of an interchangeable use of machine learning, AI. Not all AI is actual AI. Most of it ends up being just machine learning. We've essentially done some much, much more advanced decision tree scripting, and allowed it to do um, kind of some self-updating, right? And so that becomes machine learning. And then when you take AI to the next level, that's when you get to a predictive text, you get to kind of where we are today with generational AI. Um, what was interesting back then was this idea that how we were going to measure the success. So one part of the measurement of the success was, total number of transactions that completed, right? So 100 calls go in, 50% complete the transaction online, a payment is made successfully. We've got a 50% success rate, right? And that was a simple transactional measurement. But the other thing that we were looking at, and the reason that this was kind of interesting, is as we were listening to the calls that were going through that AI at the time, um, what we were hearing is that when people were able to successfully complete their mission, even though they absolutely knew that this was a robot, because we answered the call by thank you for choosing to use the automated assistant, blah 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 blah, and you go into the process, right? Um, but what was interesting, despite knowing and us being very transparent about this being a bot, um, when people were uh, able to complete their transaction, about 65% of the time, they thanked the robot before hanging
Neat.
up.
Okay.
And so we started looking at thanking the robot as sort of a measure of success. This
Ooh,
was
that's
a
smart.
measure. What's that?
That's intelligent, very smart. I like it.
Right. So we started looking at it and saying, okay, they had not just a successful experience, but a good experience, right? Because, I mean, the average American contact center caller is pretty polite usually. And then their perception of whether or not um, their perception of whether or not they felt like it was a quality call, right, is in large part whether or not they got what they wanted. Were
Mm.
they successful? Did they complete their mission? Was the transaction completed? Whatever. And so saying thank you at the end of the call before hanging up was just one of those things that we were like, okay, that's a success. And it's not one we expected. It wasn't one that we were like, looking for, but it was just kind of an interesting little data point that we were able to just extract out of that.
It could be like one of those things where, when you're being recorded by a camera for like something or a show or whatnot, that you
Yeah.
hear a lot of people say after a while they forget the camera's there. So then maybe this could be another instance where kind of people revert to their under their baseline behavioral way of conducting themselves. Bless you.
Right.
And they go in and say, "This is what we're going to do. This we're going to say."
Yep.
Thank you. That's cool. So, and how has it now? Where is it now in terms of how much did AI advance? Are you kind of now looking into like maybe analyzing a customer's voice for like minute kind of detail to gather whether or not they're happy or not happy? I mean,
Now,
yeah.
yeah. So
Or
now you've got the ability to like listen to sentiment, right?
Mhm.
You can hear the AI can hear and understand that this person is getting frustrated, and that was available early on. In the first project that I worked on, um, basically we had a series of prompts that as you were going through the transaction, if you needed something and it wasn't going to work, you just said agent. There was a host of things that you could do that would result in you going directly to an agent. If you started swearing, or if frustration was detected, and we would get a report, we would get a note that went to the agent that just said, this was coming from the AI and frustration was detected. So that when the agent picks up the call, they already know. They
Yeah.
know that they've got to first de escalate a little bit. see what's going on, and then help them and solve the problem. And so it was kind of that was very rudimentary at the time. And the way that we were determining whether or not someone was frustrated was more along the lines of words used. Um, if you started swearing at it, you were going to get a frustration detected message and you were going to go straight to an agent.
Did you find by any chance was it like the frustration level was associated in any way to demographics? I would imagine maybe maybe younger folks might be more in line, more okay to use a automated agent because they understand, oh, this is AI, it's advanced, it can understand me. Versus maybe some of the older generations might think this is BS. I need somebody that will understand me from the get go. They're frustrated.
Yep.
Have you seen that trend?
So weirdly enough, this is kind of an interesting use case because at the time we were working in the cruise industry. The cruise industry is pretty notoriously older folks. I think the average age of a cruiser is somewhere in their 40s right now. But we had a lot of people calling. The process was pretty refined. We had gone through a number of iterations of tuning and listening, and it was it was more likely that we were going to get frustration from someone over not understanding the AI not being able to understand the utterances that they were making, right? And so prior to going live, we tested it. I was working down in Miami, right? So I'm walking around a contact center going, okay, that girl's from Texas. She's got a strong accent. We got a couple of Dominican girls over here. We got this guy that's from Cuban. He's got an accent. Um, we just walked around our call centers and we're just pulling people that had really heavily accented speech. And then we were putting them in the testing process and I just need 30 minutes of your time. I just need you to talk to this thing for 30 minutes go through. And what that did was it really improved the recognition of the AI so that they could best hear sort of how it was working. Our recognition was pretty well into the 90s, right around the 94-95% rate, which was pretty good.
So, Rachel, we've established that you have over a decade worth of experience working with AI. Well, we've established that it has improved customers, or your customers or companies' bottom line.
Yep.
Can you give us some indications, just a high level of like what kind of ROI they saw from this the use of AI?
Yeah. So, in this particular case, we were looking at a pretty significant cost savings. We were taking about 12% of our overall call volume, and about 50% of that call volume never had to get touched. It all just went through the automated system, which was a pretty significant cost savings. And because this wasn't an outsourced environment, it was expensive resources. So it was pretty big cost savings. On the other side of things, I've also seen, I've worked on other AI projects that potentially created more cost than expected, either because someone made a really quick decision about reducing staff and then realized, oh, wait a minute, this isn't going to deliver what we think it's going to deliver. And we've even seen that in the market. I don't know if you were paying much attention last year when Klarna put out that big press release. I think it was maybe January of last year, where they said that they were getting 860 FTEs worth of work a month out of their AI. And everybody was like, "Oh my god." And the entire outsourcing industry and the market was just like, "Oh my god, outsourcing is gonna be decimated," and all of this stuff, right? Well, today, a year later, Klarna's hiring. They're bringing humans in because the reality is you can't completely get rid of humans. What happens is you take your high volume, low return work, shunt that to your AI, but what you end up with is much more complex, much more potentially high tension interactions, right? You don't have this one for one offset, right? What you end up with is just keeping your much more expensive, much more complex work.
Interesting. So you've and this is kind of what's going to be my next question is where do you see AI? Where do you see companies trusting AI too much and getting burned? So this is
Hiring so quickly. I could answer that so quickly. There's a couple of things that exist today, I think. There's a lot of bias that is built into a lot of the hiring models, but
okay.
also we kind of suffer from this, um it's the downside of flexibility, right? Where you can do everything. And so some people choose to do everything. You end up with this environment where you kind of paint yourself into a corner with all of your rule sets that you build up, like in your ATS, right? All of these rules build up, and then you end up with like these extraordinarily high rejection rates. And if you're not paying attention to the ones that get rejected, you're not going to pick up on the biases. You know, and I say that, I mean, I've been out in the world a long time. And biases have always existed. I used to not put my first name on my resume.
Hmm.
Um, I just used R Pace, or well, that was my maiden name at the time. I just used R Pace as my on my resume because I didn't want to say Rachel, because I didn't want anyone to make an initial judgment, mind you, 80s, 90s. But I didn't want anyone to make an initial judgment that we're not going to hire a female, right? So you don't need to
Interesting.
know that I'm female.
Oh
That's all.
wow.
I just
And
didn't put my name on my resume. But fast forward to 2025, there's 1,000 different ways that that an ATS can perceive things about you just in the tone of your writing.
I mean, this is definitely something that is of tone of your writing. That's interesting. So this is something that I think is very prevalent right now.
Yep.
It's something that is in the job market, and the folks are suffering from it. For one thing, we've seen close to I think 20,000 employees being laid
Right.
off in the last week or 2. I
Yeah.
think 8,000 from Chevron. You have 4,000 from Meta, 1,000 from Jeff Bezos' space company. I can't recall where the rest came from, but I recall seeing a few pointers or headlines on it. But what's more, they and a lot of these companies, they are, in my opinion, it's kind of driven by the AI. It's like kind of
Yep.
thinking, hey, listen, there's efficiencies that can come in. So, based on what you just said,
Yep.
these companies are willing to make a decision as big as to lay off 850 people, like you mentioned with
Yep.
the case study a few minutes ago, and only because they believe, just it's not even proven yet
Right.
that the AI is going to come in and do the work. But when you think about it, hiring and training 850 people, the amount of money and time that takes is considerable, and the damage to their brand of having to lose
Yeah.
those people is considerable. That to me is mind blowing.
I think that AI makes it a little too easy for organizations to dismiss the existing knowledge that is in their environments. In the in sort of the early days of outsourcing, one of the challenges when you were getting ready, when you were prepping, you'd never outsourced before, but you're getting prepping, you're going to move some work to the Philippines, you've got a plan. And in those early days, what we found was sort of this level of organizational maturity just didn't exist. We didn't know what we did. We didn't have knowledge bases. We didn't have all of these information systems. We might not even had a CRM. We just need someone to answer calls for our clients, but we don't want to pay, someone in the US to do it. We want some labor arbitrage. Um, so back then it was it was harder because they didn't know what their people knew, right? But today, I think a lot of organizations kind of leap to the thinking that they know everything their people know because knowledge bases exist and everything's documented now, and we're operating at a much more mature level. And I think that's not a safe bet because there's lots of stuff that people do, and I'm gonna frame this strictly within the contact center because there's so many things that happen in the call center from a customer care perspective that 90% of executives don't even know is happening. They don't know about sort of all of the different call types. They know that they have a call center and they're outsourced. But they may not necessarily know that there are 300 different call types that are handled. And yes, AI can come
Mhm.
in, and yes, we can take some of our high volume, low return work and chunk that to an AI. But what does that do to the rest of the call volume and the call assortment that's coming in? What happens is the calls that do have to be handled by humans, are more complex. So then they start, that you've got an executive that isn't a contact center person, and the executive looks at it and says, "Well, we brought in AI, and now your average handle time has gone up 200 seconds. What the heck is going on?"
Mhm.
Right? But that average handle time is going up 200 seconds because all of the low AHT
Mhm.
work has gone over to the AI. So now we have humans that are just handling the most complex things. And so this idea that we've brought in AI, we can cut a bunch of staff, not a safe bet. Especially, but it's one that people seem to be rolling the dice and making. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago about a project I was working on. It was a reporting consolidation, a data consolidation, data analytics project, right? And we put together a plan. We had change management plan, we had a project plan, we had done all of the analytics, we knew where all the data was. We knew that there were over 1,800 reports in the environment, right? And we had a staged plan for how we were going to pull all those down, we were going to replace them with a dashboard, whole thing, right? And we sit down with the COO and we start explaining, here's our plan. This is what we're going to do. It's going to take, give or take, about 6 months. And his response was, you know what? Just shut them all off and only turn on what people complain about.
Wow.
And we were like, what? He's like, no, no, this is the right way to do this. We were like, no, it's not the right way. Of course, this isn't the right way to do it, right? Um, But this was his instruction, and so we shut everything off and went into sort of response mode of people calling, going, "Where the hell are my reports?" Right? And then we also, in parallel, had to develop this portal with a dashboard and all this other stuff. And the end result was genuinely terrible because everybody, instead of complaining about their missing data, they just went out and found data, right? And
Mm.
so we had all these little operations groups that are also all of a sudden like, hey, this guy's pretty good with Excel. Let's make him an analyst, right? We had data everywhere. It was all questionable because nobody knew where it was coming from. We go through this whole process where we are now rolling out the dashboard, but because they have all these little analysts that have grown up in their groups, they're now rejecting the portal because they've got one that they like better that tells them better information of dubious data source, right? And at the end of the day, even fast forward 12 years later, 12 years since that project went on, and 12 years later, they are still fighting against these little spring up analysts that pop up in operations teams because nobody trusts the data. They
Yeah.
spent twice as much money. They took all like they just pulled the plug. And I feel like that's what we do today. Like, it's happening in organizations today because everybody's like, "Oh, we got AI now. We don't need let's get rid of this team of 400 people." And if you explode this up to what's going on, with Doge and the American government and the fact that you've got someone who doesn't know the business mucking around and throwing some AI at it and saying, "Yeah, we could just AI this." No, you can't.
Well, I mean, I agree with the concept of you have to understand what you're managing in order to get things done the
You
right way.
Yeah,
And this also kind of speaks to a whole different facet of misinformation in AI. I think I always thought of misinformation AI as being not having the AI spitting data that's essentially hallucinations of AI. But now you've kind of pointed out a whole another facet of it, which is you you're assuming AI can do stuff that
yeah,
it cannot do, one, and two, it could be that you're not looking at the metadata, you're not adjusting your analysis of your metrics once you apply AI. So in the case of the call center and having the duration of each call being longer, that does not necessarily equate to a bad thing, because now those folks, the call center agents, are handling less calls, but very complex calls. And
yep,
it just brings you make it obvious that when these tools are implemented, these decisions, major decisions, should be not taken lightly and should be
yeah.
done with a bit more thought. And so the I think this kind of brings me to a next question, which is, knowing what we know now, do you feel like these companies that are making these major layoffs and across industries, not just tech, are we gonna see an issue where 6 months from now, or a year and a half from now, where all of a sudden they have been severely impacted in a negative way, and they're rushing to bring back people on board? Which also, to be fair, we have seen recently Apple say that they're gonna dump another $500 billion in the economy to bring
Yep.
in hire some people. So to be fair, they are some tech companies are hiring, but maybe this could be just a natural way of the market pivoting to say, the market doesn't need this skill set, now it needs this skill set, so we're just focusing towards that. What are your thoughts there? What do you see happening with these companies?
I see a couple of things. I see a big shift toward much, much larger sales organizations. We will enter into an environment where basically everybody's a salesperson, every role is a sales job. That's the reality of it.
I
And you
Sorry to
know,
interrupt you, but that's it. I was just telling my a few of my neighbors, I'm like, you want to teach something to your kids?
sales
Teach them
skills,
sales and marketing.
sales and
That's
marketing, right?
everybody. That's an essential skill at this point.
Yeah, I think you've got you've got an organization of people that are vested in keeping costs as low as possible, right? You've got another organization of people that are vested in growing the business. And growing the business is all that is going to be required, right? We will get to a point where you don't need a big computer science lab. What you need is a couple of guys or girls that are really, really good at writing prompts. And if you were smart, instead of hiring a computer science for that person for that, you would hire someone who's like a theater major or a creative writing major or a library science major, right?
Interesting perspective.
That's who I would be looking for from, like, a prompt engineer perspective. Like, I want someone who can communicate well with the AI in a meaningful way to extract the best effort from the AI. And I know that's may not be a normal take,
It's so I actually, I'll let you finish, then I can give you my take on it.
but the other side of things is having the right person make the prompts is great. But the other side of things is sort of the training piece of it and how you get away from all of the biases that are built into it. Today, there is this sort of vague perception that AI is neutral, that it's sort of just an objective, you do the typing, you ask me the questions, and I'm just going to give you an answer based on all human knowledge, right? You have to be way more specific than that. But the other side of things is it is all biased. And it's biased for a lot of reasons. It's biased because of the data that it was taught on. It was biased because of how the learning algorithms were written, right? Because there was a human engaged in that process, and that human is inherently biased, right? Um, but on the other side of things, when you start looking at how we use humans to train AI, can be interesting because I've done that a few times. And even then, you're not necessarily getting the right a complete global assortment of humans in order to do this, right? If you sat down with HR and said, "Look, I need 3 South Africans. I need 2 Sub-Saharan Africans. I need 4 white Americans. I need 3 Eastern Europeans." And you sat down with HR, and HR would be like, "What are you saying?" And I'm like, "No, it's because we want to take bias out of it, so we have to hire against the bias." When you and I started talking, it was very much about the DEI conversation, right? Because, uh, I have opinions. But anyway, like, all of those things, it it all goes into the app, and so there is no neutrality in AI.
Yeah, which ties to the need for critical thinking, which I think is also
Yes.
part of what we want to talk about. So,
Yep.
first off, I have a lot of kind of opinions to also add to myself. So, I think the whole point about the humans are biased, and I completely agree. But also, I think going back to what we were saying about, like, when you deal with AI, you have to think holistically and just think of different facets. I
Yep.
think one of the facets also with to deal with this bias is to realize that just because somebody is, like you mentioned, somebody could be from Eastern Europe or somebody from Sub-Saharan Africa, doesn't automatically mean that they all going to have the same opinion.
Yep.
They're themselves going to have different opinions. You have to have a true sample size of a one, like, segment or another, and that sample has to represent all the different various kind of backgrounds and different types of opinions, which could become very, very difficult to kind of remove bias. It's, I
Yep.
would say, near
Well,
impossible to remove bias. So I do agree with you. Bias is there. So that's where kind of critical thinking comes into play, and I think that's one of the skills that's going to be vital in the future with working with AI is like critical thinking and what that entails and how difficult it is and how you have so many biases and then you have to kind of fight yourself, so to speak, to
right.
keep that up to on the surface every time you deal with someone or you think about something, because that could cause you to go in the wrong direction. And I like your suggestion about the whole, yeah, taking an arts major or what have you to kind of be a prompt engineer, because they will kind of push the folks that are into AI and they understand how it's trained. In a lot of cases, it's going to give you an answer based on a, let's call it, like a standard deviation from what they believe the answer is going to be. But if you want to go 2 or 3 standard deviations away to kind of go to think outside the box, you
Yep.
need prompts that push it to go outside the box, which is interesting in my opinion, because we all know that programmers thrive on kind of deterministic systems of, like, where 1 plus 1 equals 2.
Right.
But the AI that they're creating is more, it introduces randomness to the equation, and much like human unpredictability. And the irony is that we're building AI tools that challenge the very perception, the precision of value.
Yep.
So it's to me, this is a fascinating topic and one that requires a bit more to expand on. So you know, I feel like we're back in the days when I started working at IBM, we'd always, when we had to do a change it to an environment, we'd always start with, we'd have a non-production environment. We'd test things out before we roll into production. But I feel like what we're doing with AI, we're just going straight to production and seeing what happens and what breaks, which
Mhm.
is scary kind of in a way.
Yes,
Uh,
it's that whole Big Bang idea that baffles the mind. I am not a risk averse person, but for that, very risk averse.
yeah. So so this kind of ties into, what do you think, where else do you think AI could be actually, you know, delaying us or harming or creating or expediting bad decisions in a corporation?
I think there's some things today like risk models where you're potentially denying credit to people, right? There are I've got a client that is doing some work on healthcare models.
Okay.
Looking at prescribing behavior and making sure that they're basically using AI to ensure that the medication that is prescribed is the best medication for a particular illness and doesn't have all of the
Interaction.
contraindications and overlaps, which is a really really interesting process, right? It looks at and it's working within both like epic systems, so it's working within hospital systems,
It
um
yep.
and and so it's really kind of an interesting product to help you know make some shifts in how people prescribe medicate how doctors prescribe medication. So I think that's an interesting one, but it also has the potential to go horribly wrong. Let's be very careful with human health, please. And I think that you've got kind of an over reliance on the idea of automation, and understanding how it works. But those are the things that you're gonna deal with. Outside of that, it's how much money, when you think about, um, how much money do we as individuals spend on, uh, like, kind of garbage AI content? Right? Like, there was an article that came out, I think it was this week, that Spotify has just a truckload of that, like, lo-fi droning, the, like, pink noise and green noise and that stuff, brown noise that people are listening to, like, um and it's all AI. And they used to pay musicians to make, it's not junk music, it's not music, it's just
White noise.
audio, it's sound, it's white noise or whatever hertz they're producing it at, right? Um, so there was an article that came out this week talking about how, now that they've got AI, they can just use AI to produce these and so they can save money, but they're not passing any cost savings down to us as the consumers of these products. Um, you know, uh, I just feel like there's all these little parts and pieces where people are looking for shortcuts, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Um, and at the end of the day, the work pieces of AI are the easiest part. The harder parts of AI are all of like the deep fake and all of that stuff that's going on out there, which can be scary. I mean, when I look at something and I can't tell, and I've been in uh this business and on the internet for a really long time, and you know, I have to do a double take sometimes when I'm looking at I saw after the USA Canada game. I love hockey, and after that game, I'm scrolling Instagram and they've got an AI video of McDavid just on a tear, just absolutely just ranting and tearing everybody up, and just trashing the US and just chirping basically, right? But it was all AI. It was very clearly AI. The entire channel is labeled as AI, and everything they do is funny fakes of coaches or players or whatever just talking absolute crap about their teammates. You know, it's funny. Uh, you have to know it is AI. It is labeled AI, but even today, I can post something that I use AI to make, And there's nothing that makes me label it as AI,
Hmm.
right? There's nothing that says this video, there's nothing that forces me to choose to label something AI. And there isn't a process today that like looks at and inspects a piece of content and says, yeah, that's valid.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself erodes the trust that exists today. You can't just look at something and trust that it's real anymore. You have to apply some critical thinking. You have to dissect the parts and ask yourself the
But
47 questions.
do you think this kind of brings up a interesting dilemma, kind of maybe a philosophical one. Do you feel because of that, that the kind of what's the saying? You can't put the jack back in the box or something, at this point, and
Yeah,
because of that, do you think that now the only way to get past it is to actually bring people back to critical thinking, which I think even before AI, we were starting to lose it. If you see a lot of like the news outlets and this and that, everything is just basically geared to tell you what to think instead of back in the day where it's just kind of here's the facts.
yeah,
You make your own decision, you make your own analysis, where now it's just, you know, it's whatever people are only able to believe whatever they can consume in a 10-second video. So
yeah.
could this be a good thing, like
No,
a hidden good thing?
here's the thing. If critical thinking of humanity is going to save us, we are absolutely doomed. Like like it isn't our nature to question everything.
Hmm.
And don't I have philosophies, I have theories, maybe not appropriate for a sober business conversation, right? But I do feel like we've come up in an environment in the last 25 years where we have this exhaustive in your face news cycle. We are spoon fed nonsense, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. We are spoon fed information. And then the general expectation is you just spew whatever content that you're spoon fed. We're spoon fed algorithmic content, regardless of what your drug of choice is, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or Blue Sky or one of the 327 other ones that exist. That's You are spoon fed content. You are propagandized and radicalized already. Your brain is primed to just absorb information. And the biases that exist in your brain. Oop, confirmation bias. Oop, 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 oop. Drink it up, drink it up, drink it up. Next thing you know, you've had a gallon of Kool-Aid and you're out there commenting on the internet and formed, you know, opinions about things that you have like zero information on.
Yeah,
So,
goes back
I'll
just
end that rant there, but it is the I think the nature of humanity. We have to be critical. We have to question everything. There was I don't know if you've read any Neil Stevenson books, but he wrote this book called Fall. I think it's called Fall, Dodge and Hell or something like that. Uh One of the sort of the through stories of this book is there's this catastrophic event that happens in Utah. It turns out to be an absolute deep fake fraud. It never happened, right? There was supposedly like this nuclear explosion in this small town in Utah. It never happens. Someone else gets caught up in sort of the drama and started taking the blame. And what they end up doing to resolve this person's reputation is to just flood the market with so much worse stuff that the other stuff was just like, oh, okay, whatever. Right. And it's kind of where we are now, right? Where the market is just flooded with information. We go to bed exhausted, just absorbing information, regardless of whether it's information you want or not. regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum or not, there's a constant barrage of information. And if there was one thing that I could get from AI, would be a filter of information. AI filtered down this barrage, right? AI knows me. I have a relationship. We've been talking for years. So they know what my biases are.
Okay.
Do we just lean into our biases? Do we just lean in and say, you know what? I don't want to hear any of that other stuff. I don't want to, I
Would
don't
you
want to,
do that? Or would you ask,
okay.
give me a balanced view. Tell me where I can have flaws.
I think okay. I would say I want all the views. I don't know if you're familiar with ground news, but I use ground news all the time.
I
That's
no,
my
yeah,
ground news is my primary news source, and I absolutely love it because it gives you a news story, and then it gives you these are the left leaning, these are the center, these are the right leaning, this is the percentage of skew. It gives you everything, and so you'll see a news story with all of the 27 different headlines, right?
interesting.
And
What's it
then
called again?
it's called ground news. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest tools that has ever been created.
Okay.
We talked about AI. This one is better.
Okay.
This is better for those people that want to poke holes in their information bubbles, right?
Beautiful.
I
Beautiful.
want to
Oh,
see
oh, yeah.
because just if you look at just look at a set of headlines for one news story, and I don't care what end, right? Look at those set of headlines, and you can just at a glance say, okay, this is the manipulation. This is emotionally written. So I'm going to click on it, but I click on it knowing that these headlines are meant to stimulate an emotion. And you can do it at a glance. As soon as you start looking at it and you realize, oh, okay. Now it what it does is it says here are all of the biases that exist for this particular news story. And then it gives you some information about whether, a particular news source is high factuality, low factuality. It gives you a lot of really good information about the source itself before you ever read the article, right? And it is, in my opinion, one of the most useful tools. I wish everybody would use it. Absolutely love it. Um,
I'm
it,
definitely gonna check it out after this.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is my favorite app for sure.
Oh, well,
It's the number one app on my phone because I am a insatiable news reader.
I hear you. I think we all are and trying to figure out where things are heading. And going back to some of the things you talked about with AI and the the future of using it. I've been trying to use it for some of a creating kind of my own AI agents to automate some business tasks here and there. And I've gotten to a point where I realize, even though I have access to like all the latest and greatest, from Perplexity to Grok to ChatGPT's the latest version, the paid versions,
Yep.
uh, you know, uh, I find that I spend more time trying to solve a problem. Sometimes if it's like me, it could be a developing problem or a logic problem,
Yep.
because I'm just asking it questions and asking it to solve it, and then I can jump from one model to another, and I'm not getting an answer. Where if I just stopped, actually using my brain instead,
And think through it.
think through it, I
Yeah.
found I would have solved it hours earlier.
Yeah.
So I think one of the if I had one thing to say or advice to give is that start using a lot, because I know a lot of people still, believe it or not, have not touched it yet. Start
Yep.
using AI, start understanding its limitations, and know where to apply it, and then when to continue to use your brain, and the importance of critical thinking in all of this. I know there's people thinking that there could be general AI in the future where everything is kind of just done there, then and there. I can't speak to that. I'm not that informed on that topic.
Mhm.
But I feel for the foreseeable future, the need to continue to use your own judgment is vital. And think of AI as if you're building a birdhouse, instead of using a handsaw, you're now using a power tool. But you still need to know what the birdhouse looks like,
Yep.
where to cut, where to assemble, and it's all is that it's doing is helping you achieve the goal faster. And knowing and understanding that tool is vital. So with that, I guess I come to my final kind of question here. If you had to predict where AI is heading next for business, what would you say?
I think that what's going to happen in the future of business AI, at least in the very near future, is I think people are going to get really pragmatic. I think they're going to get very focused on sort of working with what they have, right? And being pragmatic about what they're going to save. You're not going to fully automate everything end to end. But if you can shave 20 seconds here, if you can reduce your um throughput, or reduce human touch on some kind of high volume, low return processing. Those are the best ways to do it today. It's the lowest risk. You're going to have the lowest problematic hallucinations and other stuff like that. I think that people are going to get pretty pragmatic about it, and that's what makes the best sense for business, unless your business is AI. And then if your business itself is AI, then you're you know riding the hype train and building up really cool stuff. I talked with a guy yesterday that uses AI and the camera as a work at home solution for security, right? So if I'm a contact center agent and I'm working from home, there the AI is constantly connected to the camera. And if someone comes and walks up to me behind me, right? We call it shoulder surfing in this world. So if someone comes up behind me to look at my screen, that is a data security breach and it shuts down the whole screen. And it
Mm,
doesn't have to identify the person walking up behind me, it just identifies that there's a someone walking behind me, shut down the screen.
interesting.
If I pull out my cell phone and it's visible and the camera can see it, it shuts down the screen. And that is a very simple, pragmatic, useful tool, right? That I think is really, I think a great use of AI.
Yeah. So basic, and this is kind of similar to what I'm doing right now with my own practice. Is kind of going before the low hanging fruit, because I feel like everybody's going in and going for the moonshot from the get go.
Right.
And my take on it is that AI is a great thing if used in the right way. But right now, I think it's the potential is great, but if you want to use it in a consistent, reliable manner, you have to kind of go for the low hanging fruit, for the things that are day to day operations that, when compounded,
Yep.
can make a major difference, and that's where you should focus. Rachel, I can't thank you enough for this
It's been
beautiful
great.
conversation. It was very insightful. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but from my end, I very thankful that you took the time to jump on and give us your take.
No, this is great. I appreciate the time. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and I've got a lot of projects that I'm working on, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk in the future.
Thank you.